Hey guys, I'm Lewis Denver, owner of Recycle Bicycle Sales, the bike shop here. I've worked in bike shops for about 12 years now, so I've seen customers make lots of mistakes on their bikes, and there's lots of things that we've had to repair as the bike mechanics. So in today's video, I want to talk about the 5 most common mistakes that I see customers make with their bikes. Also, this is actually a part 2 video. We've done a part 1 further back in our YouTube channel, and I think it was actually our most viewed video. So if you like this video, go check that one out too. Well, number 1 in this list is that I see people over tightening their bolts. They're doing up their bolts too tight, especially on carbon fiber. Carbon fiber, carbon fiber, carbon fiber, carbon fiber, carbon fiber everywhere. Jokes aside though, if you are working on carbon fiber at home in your home workshop, I would strongly recommend investing in a torque wrench. A torque wrench is going to be able to read the Newton meters that we're putting on a bolt. That's how we measure the tension of a bolt in Newton meters, the torque of a bolt. So there's bolts all throughout the bike, whether it's the seat post, the handlebar, the stem, the this, the that. All of these bolts have a different recommended torque setting, so I would recommend buying a torque wrench. For what it's worth, some of the most common bolts that I see people over tightening are things like the cockpit in general, whether it's the stem bolts or the pinch bolts on the stem or the top cap. I see those ones get tightened up a little bit too much all too often. And another one is the seat clamp, whether it's a seat clamp or a seat wedge like this one is. They're probably the most common ones that I see, but some other little ones could be things like the bottle cage bolts. They're usually a lightweight aluminium bolt rather than a steel bolt, so they're a little bit fragile. If you do them too tight, you might round it. Probably not going to crack the carbon, but you might ruin the bolt, which will just bring in a whole nother world of problems. And if you do find yourself accidentally tightening up the bolts too much, you might crack the frame, which is going to end up meaning that it goes into the bin, like this one over here, which I accidentally maybe tightened up too much with a hammer for science. And if you'd like to see a video of that happening to the poor old frame, we've got a video further back in our YouTube channel, which was called Carbon vs Alloy, What Should You Buy? It was a pretty fun video actually. Carbon fiber everywhere. Even on an aluminium frame or a steel frame or titanium or some type of metal, you also don't want to over tighten the bolts. If you do them too tight on a metal frame, they could seize in place. They might not necessarily crack the frame because aluminium and metal is pretty strong, but they might seize in place, which means you won't be able to undo it again. So regardless of what type of bike you've got, you don't want to over torque the bolts. On a similar but slightly dissimilar topic, I can talk about the skewer. Whether you've got a quick release like this or a through axle, if you do them up too tight, you're going to struggle to undo it. These quick release levers, I see some people sometimes tightening up the lever up against the frame, which makes it very difficult for you to fit your fingers underneath to be able to undo it again. Not necessarily doing it too tight, but you might just do it up in a bad spot. That's why it's a little bit dissimilar. Another mistake that I see some beginners make is ignoring bad noises. Your bike might be ticking along, the gears might be making a little bit of a noise, or maybe you've got these powerful disc brakes and as you brake, it sounds like a howling wolf next to you. It might be that as you're pedaling along, the chain is really dry, so it sounds like a squeaky mouse down around your feet. There could be some little noises like this that might sound different to how the bike normally sounds that we did notice, but we don't really care about. If there's a new noise, there's usually a reason for the new noise. If we can find out what that reason is, then hopefully we can fix that problem. It might be something as simple as lubricating the chain, or it might be doing a quick little gear tune, or making sure the brakes are nice and straight and clean. Could be a multitude of different things. They're probably the first ones that come to my mind. Additionally, you might have some noises around the bearings, most notably the bottom bracket bearings. The bottom bracket bearing is the bearing that allows these cranks to spin freely. We've got one on each side of the bearing and the crank actually goes through that. If the bearings were dry or maybe they're sitting loose or they're worn out, as you stand up and pedal, you might hear it creaking a little bit underneath you. It almost sounds sandy and gritty. That's a pretty clear indicator that we might need to either re-grease or replace the bottom bracket. Same idea goes for the headset. We've got the 2 bearings here, and if they're making an unusual noise that we're not used to, that could be a good sign that we need to remove and re-grease or replace the headset bearings. And also, if you are a mountain biker, chances are your bike is making heaps of weird noises and you're choosing not to think about it because you've got your earphones in and you're doing your jumps and that sort of thing. And I get it, I'm a mountain biker too. But there's a lot that can also make noises on the mountain bike. Things like the different pivot bearings, the spots where it's moving. There's even more bearings on a dual suspension mountain bike than there are on a racing road bike. So if there's a weird noise, get it checked out. And it's worth getting it checked out sooner rather than later, because as we know, the more time that you spend putting it off, means the more money it's probably going to end up costing in the end. Murphy's Law. Another common mistake that I see, especially with beginners, is cross-chaining. When I say cross-chaining, I mean that they're sitting in an unusual gear ratio. Since on this bike we have 2 gears on the front and 11 on the back, so we've got 22 different gears that we can pick from. There's some that are smarter gears and some that are maybe not quite so smart gears. There's probably 20 gears that we'd sit in and 2 that we'd try and avoid if we can. And those gears are small and small. I mean the small chainring on the front and the smallest cog on the back. So the reason that we don't want to be sitting in this gear, in the small and small, is the chain line is twisted a little bit on the side. So we're going to hear it rubbing on this front derailleur here as we're pedaling along. It's just going to make a little bit of a noise, and it also means that now there's a lot of slack in that chain there. So it's more likely to fall off. So what we could do, instead of sitting in this gear, if we go up, say, 3 or 4 gears at the back maybe, and then we go up the big chainring, that's 4 cogs, and up at that one there, we're now going to be pedaling at the exact same speed that we were when we were using that cross-chained gear. And same on the other end of the spectrum as well, big and big. If we're in the big chainring here and the big cog at the back, what we will find is that sometimes it's bringing a lot of tension on this derailleur here and a lot of tension on the chain there. That feels like a guitar string almost. So it's just putting a lot more pressure on this rear derailleur, and the chain will be rubbing on the inside of the derailleur here. Yes, you can sit in this gear. You can see right now I'm pedaling away, but it's just a bit of a harder gear. So again, instead of sitting in that big and big, we could go down a couple at the back, 3 or 4, and then down to the small chainring at the front. And then we should be pedaling at the exact same cadence that we were. It's just a smarter gear, and now the chain's at a straighter line, which in turn is also going to help the chain last a bit longer. And the 4th most common mistake that I see people make are using their brake pads too long. The brake pads are a consumable part, and they're obviously the part that's going to slow you down when you're pulling on your brake levers. If you wear the brake pad right down so there's no brake pad, it's just the wall that the brake pad's sitting on, then you'll have a metal pad touching up against a metal, in this case, brake rotor, which is going to wear through that brake rotor even faster. So instead of replacing the $30 brake pad, you might have to replace the $30 brake pad and the $100 brake rotor, when really, if you came in just a couple weeks earlier, you might have just only had to do the brake pads. So a bit of preventative maintenance, or a bit of thinking ahead here, I suppose. Just thinking about keeping on top of the brake pads a little bit. That's with the disc brake. If we were looking at a rim brake option, which this one is not, if you were to wear the brake pads all the way down and they get so thin that the metal brake shoes are touching up against the braking track, which will be on the wheel up here, you'll end up damaging the wheel. And replacing a wheel is a pretty expensive task. So best to stay on top of the brake pads. There's no specific rule with how often you should replace your brake pads, and there's so many variables that go into it. If you're spending time up in the hills, or you're only riding along the beach, or you're riding in the rain, or you're not riding in the rain, or there's a lot of variables here, but as a pretty average rule of thumb, most bike mechanics would say you probably want to replace them at least once a year. And if you can't remember the last time that you had your brake pads changed, that's a pretty clear indicator. So pop in store and I'm happy to help you out. And the 5th most common mistake that I see people make are putting on their tires backwards. Bicycle tires are usually directional. They're supposed to go a certain way. They're not bi-directional. You couldn't just put them on either way and it's totally fine. Although some are, and it will usually say on the box if they are, but most tires are designed to roll a certain way. There's a couple of reasons for that. More common in the mountain bikes than the road bikes, but in the road bikes, there'll be usually some slits in the tire that can help squeeze water out from underneath it. Kind of like on your car. If you're driving along with slick racing tires, the water can't get out from under there and it can get quite slippery. Same kind of idea with a bike. You want to have some cuts and some grooves in the tire. I think they call it sipping. I think that's the word. They've got some sipping slices in there that can help squeeze the water out from underneath the tire. So it is important that they're on the right way, even in regards to braking performance, because we want nice, powerful braking performance, and cornering. This is especially important when we're talking about mountain bike tires in regards to the braking performance. They are directional, one way, and I can see that this one looks like it almost wants to point forward. If I had that on backwards, it means that the side knobs along here, when I'm leaning to go around the corner, might not grip into the ground the way that they need to, or if I'm hard on the brakes coming into a corner, I need the tires to slow down, not necessarily skid, although skidding's cool, but sometimes I actually want to slow down and not just look cool. So making sure that the tires are on the correct way is super important. And a little side note here, which all the road bikers probably won't care about, but the mountain bikers might be interested to know this. On the drive side of a Maxxis tire, they've got the logo. This one says Ardent, but if I spin it around, interesting fact, there's no logo on the other side. It only says Maxxis. So interesting fact that you may or may not have known is that the logo is only on the drive side. So instead of trying to find the arrow, oh, which way does it point? The answer is the logo will always be on drive side. And another interesting fact that nobody's gonna care about, if the Maxxis logo is in yellow, it means that they've bought them aftermarket, but if it's white, it means it came on the bike from factory. And there you go, now you know. And a bonus tip that we've got is for you mountain bikers. If you've got a mountain bike with a dropper seat post, a common issue that I see, or a common mistake I see, is that some people store their bike with the dropper post down. It's actually quite important that we have the dropper post up and we have the stanchion protruding out of the dropper post because of all the hydraulic fluid and everything that's floating around in there. We don't want it sitting up against the stanchion while we're storing it. We want it sitting down on the seals of the dropper post while it's being stored. So another top tip is store your bike overnight with the dropper post open. If you were to leave the dropper post stored for a long time down, this can eventually damage the dropper post. I know we're not even using it, but it can just deteriorate even faster. So you might have to take it to the local bike shop to get it bled or to get it re-negatived or re-aired or whatever they call it. And for what it's worth, not every bike shop knows how to bleed a dropper post. So it might just be worth noting that. So my recommendation is leave it open. And an interesting fact, if you've ever sat on a RockShox dropper seat post and when you sit on it, you can feel it dropping a little bit without you even pressing the button down here, that usually means that it's probably been stored for a while down, and that's something that will need to get repaired. If you've ever been riding along with a buddy and you've seen their dropper seat post slowly sitting down and then they have to keep lifting it up and it's just moving under their own body weight, that could be a pretty clear indicator that maybe they leave it stored down overnight. So there you have it. There's 5 more of the most common mistakes that I see people make on their bicycle. Do you do any of these things? Or are there mistakes that you've seen your friends make that you want to dob them in for, or maybe something that you've done that you've learned from, and you could let us know in the comments below? I love reading through all of that stuff, so let us know. Otherwise, I'm going to say thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next video. See you guys. Carbon fiber everywhere.